So hello and welcome everyone. Seems like we've already got some early birds rolling in. We're so happy to have you all with us today, whether you joined us last week or not. While we wait for everyone to join, we still have about 2 minutes. I am going to launch a quick poll for you all. If you are joining us from last time, this should look familiar to you, but we do ask if you can let us know if you did participate in last week's conversation. So just a few more minutes. For new people joining, we have a quick poll to start off, and we will get started in just about a minute now. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of people joining us from various places, and a lot of people who did not attend our first webinar. If that is you, do not worry. We will take time to review before we get started. So you will get some context for this discussion. Okay, it is just hit the hour, so I am going to end this poll now, and we are going to get started. I'll share the results with you for a little while. First of all, thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to How to Provide Quality Education for All During Crises Part 2. My name is Mariah O'Mara. I am the head of media here at HundrED. I will be joined by a number of panelists, both from within HundrED and a few guest speakers as well. So before we get started, a few housekeeping points. This session is being recorded, so you will get a copy of this after the session has ended. You can submit your questions anytime. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. So you can ask your questions there. If you see a question you like, feel free to like them and comment. So we will have a designated time in this session to answer those questions. Also, we will be having an exit survey. We want to stress that this is a conversation. So while we are up here right now and we will be talking to you for the next hour, this is just the first step in many. And we do want to include you. We want to hear your voice, and we really do encourage you to complete this survey and to help us and to help provide quality education for all. Also, you can talk to us on social media at HundrED.org. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if you want to talk specifically about this session, we encourage you to use the hashtag #QualityEdForAll. So with that out of the way, we'll move on to our schedule for today. Oh, quickly, as some of you who have joined the last session know, we do have a 100 Ambassadors program. Our 100 Ambassadors are a global network of over 400 education stakeholders from over 92 countries across the world. They are an amazing network, and if you are in the education sector, it is it's great for providing you access to resources and opportunities. One such example is we have just released a report on supporting the continuation of teaching and learning during COVID. And that includes resources for online learning. This report was produced in cooperation with the OECD, World Bank, and Harvard. And Pukraj, our community manager, is going to drop a link to that report in the chat for you. And we will also drop a link to join and become an ambassador. You really get out of it as much as you put in. So if you would like to join, we would love to have you. Next, the schedule for today. I will soon finish talking, and then we will have a quick review of last week and Then we will move on to steps 8 and 10. We will have questions pulled from the chat, and we will also have a special time for panelists to join us on the screen and ask their own burning questions. Then we will go on and talk about next steps. So with that, I would like to introduce today's speakers, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. But we have Pasi Sahlberg, who is a renowned author, educator, and professor at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, and our very own Saku Tuominen, who is our founder and creative director. So with that, I will pass it over to Saku.
Thank you, Mariah, and hello from Helsinki. Late afternoon in Helsinki, late evening in Sydney, Australia, right, Pasi?
That's correct, yes.
And so on. So what we are trying to do in here is that how I see this is that this is more like a starting point than the end of the discussion. So what we've been discussing with Pasi and with our community is that especially in crises like this, but also after crises, so much of a good education is coming back to the high quality leadership. And we wanted to think about the areas or the steps that might result into a great leadership. And when we are talking about leadership, we are talking about country level. So how do you lead the education in a country? It can be a city level, it can be a school level, and it can be a class level. So what we are fundamentally talking about in here is helping leaders to lead in areas like this in all levels of these. And we created our 10-step plan, which is only the starting point of the discussion. And what are the 10 steps we decided to have together with Pasi is that there needs to be a clear, high quality leadership, which is going back to the clarity of communication, joint vision, and vision which is created together with the community, with teachers, parents, students who are engaged. And based on the vision, you are selecting selecting solutions, you are testing them, you are choosing the ones that could be scaled. But this is again only the starting point. You have to be developing those constantly. And in order to be able to develop, you need to have resources, and all of this will be a long process. It's taking a lot of patience. And what is our goal at the moment is that we want to be asking help from you, asking is that, are these the 10 steps you think are relevant? Would you question some? Would you be adding some others? And how do you see this? And our end goal would be is that we want to be creating some kind of tool or process that any one of you in any country, any continent, in different kind of environments could be using as a help to lead education and provide quality education for all. Pasi, before we are going briefly to the discussion we had last week, would you like to comment the overall goal that we are having with these two webinars?
No, I think you spoke very very clearly about that, Saku, and hello everybody around the world. Really, I think it's really important that everybody who is listening to this and joining us today takes this as a conversation, and like Saku said, that we are beginning something that would hopefully lead to better planned and executed and implemented changes and developments and innovation in a system. So take it as a conversation, and don't hesitate to share your own wisdom as we go through these different steps that Saku is speaking about. I think the starting point is right and correct, and I think the end goal that you spoke about is also valuable. So let's move on.
Okay, so we studied it's difficult to be leading education or selecting innovations or improving education unless you have a vision. And for example, the vision can change. For example, if you are having a situation like this, meaning what is realistic to expect from educators in an era like this, for example, are you making compromises? Do you concentrate on something? Do you simplify? How do you take care of each and every child and so forth? How do you, Pasi, see the role of leader? Because education has quite often been bottom up, and leadership quite often is, even if it's engaging, it's top down. So how do you see the role of leadership, good leadership in times like this?
Well, I think the accent should really, Saku, be on the times like this, because this is a very unusual time. And I think that, of all of these 4 elements of the start of the list that we had, the vision is probably the most often challenged and questioned now. I mean, what do we really want to see when we are beginning to come out of this unusual crisis situation that was caused by the pandemic? And you cannot have a shared vision of anything, let alone in education, unless you have a leadership that is able to lead that conversation through community engagement and insight and kind of a wisdom to lead these things. We have a lot of examples. Actually, the library of education reforms is full of these attempts to try to put through some changes in education that have not been built on a good, insightful, shared leadership. And I think we have to not only think about what type of school do we want to have in the future, but at the same time comes the question that what is the leadership that will lead there? And I think many of the traditional, conventional models and ideas of educational leadership probably have to be now questioned, also because this new leadership really requires people who are able to think outside of the box and question many of the traditional ways of thinking. I mean, in a normal world, you can be a successful leader just by doing your job well. But now, if you think about right now, somebody who is leading a system or even leading a school through all these changes, this traditional knowledge and experience can take you half of the way, but the rest of the way you need to really build on something else that probably brings these new elements and new aspects of educational leadership into the picture. I think this is one of those issues, Saku, that I think remains to be seen a little bit later. Who are those leaders, and where are those systems that are able to build this journey on bold, courageous idea and insight and vision, and then lead the schools and educators and everybody else there.
I fully agree. Lassi, can we get the steps 1 to 4 to the screen? I think that in times like this, we all agree, we all understand that the situation is really complex. And I think that in a complex time, I think you have to simplify the message so that you can keep everyone on board. So one question for you, Pasi, is that how do you see engaging all the possible target groups? Meaning, how do you engage parents? How do you engage students? How do you engage teachers? How do you communicate those? It's easy to say, but it's really complicated to implement well in times like this. So how do you see the concept of simple, clear, consistent message in times like this?
Yeah, I think again, Saku, when you use the word times like this, I see that engaging people into conversation about what do we need to do, or how do we need to lead things, or how do we get out of this thing to the situation where everything will be what we need to have for the future, is probably easier than in the normal situation. I think in a usual times that was before, I think engaging people would have been probably more complicated, because there are either people who want to stick with their own fixed ideas of what do they want the school to do or learning to look like, or they simply don't care. But I think now those those expectations that people have had, not always, but often will be challenged. And those people who thought that they don't have anything to say, I think more of them will now realize that when they have seen what happens when their own children are at home, they are not in the school, and they recognize the value of teachers and school and leadership, that they understand many of these things better, and they have more to say about these things. So I'm quite optimistic with this engagement thing. I'm less optimistic probably with the leadership thing that we spoke earlier, but I'm more kind of optimistic about the fact that there will be probably more people than we think who want to be heard and have something valuable to say about these processes. So that's really a kind of a good silver lining of this whole thing, if you wish.
I fully agree. Let's move towards the steps 5 to 7, and let's go through this one quite fast. But what is the logic behind our thinking in here is that once you have decided the direction, meaning where do you want to go, then you have to identify what could be the tools in various areas of education that could take you there. Then you have to admit that most likely some of them don't work as well as you expected, and that's why you have to test them and select the ones which are well received by the teachers, by the students, by the parents, and so on. And only once you have some kind of certainty that these are the tools that seem to work and are well received, you can start scaling them or spreading them. Because if you are spreading them way too early, you are also spreading the possible mistakes and the possible problems and so on. And Pasi, do you want to comment these steps briefly, or do you want to step straight to the development?
Just very quickly, Saku, I think I think the fact that we are part of the global network, we have the HundrED network here, and people joining us have their own networks. There are hundreds of global networks actually where people can explore these ideas and rather than test them, see whether they work alone, but hear from others what happens when these ideas are tested, and then spreading them. That again, my optimism within these steps really comes from the fact that we don't need to do these things alone, that we have these huge international partnerships and colleagues around the world who can help us. So let's make sure that we don't try these things alone, but we network and share these things.
I fully agree, but let's move on to the step 8. And I think that this is one of our favorite topics together with Pasi when we are discussing about improving education, which means that if you are superficial, you might take an innovation and you start implementing. But how we see this is that it's only the starting point, because once you are testing the innovation in real life, you might find that it doesn't work perfectly. You have to be improving, you have to make modifications and so on. So in your mind, how do you see the role of continuous development in improving education? How should it be done, and whose role is it?
Okay, Saku, if you don't mind, can I ask you to just say a few more words about what are we actually talking about when we talk about innovation here? This is just for those who were not with us last time, so that we know what we are actually thinking about when we talk about innovations within this education development context.
It's a great question, so I'll try to specify. So for example, if you make a decision that you should be teaching empathy in education, or you should be finding great ways to increase the capacity of kids to be asking great questions or enhance creativity and so forth. There's a lot of great tools out there that are doing exactly that, and we call innovations. We call innovations for us are ideas that have proven to work at least in some context, but it doesn't mean that they will work in other contexts as well. So you might be saying that this might work, this innovation coming from Finland might work in Australia, but we have to test it with the local teachers and so on, maybe there's a need for modifications. And then I think that it's a never-ending process developing these innovations. So question for you, Pasi, is that, do you have a feeling that this is quite often overlooked? And if so, whose role would it be to be improving these innovations?
Yeah, let me say first one thing. I remember reading a very influential book already 30 years ago when I was studying to become a teacher educator. It was Peter Senger's book, The Fifth Discipline. I don't know how many of you know that, but in that book, Peter Senger writes that education, although the book is not about education, it's about innovation and change. The education is one of those very few areas of human activity where we tend to behave in a way that if the new idea or innovation doesn't work, we will go and take another one. And if you think about any other field, medicine or technology, anything, it's not quite like this, that there are people try something, they try a new idea. If it doesn't work, they try to improve it a little bit, try it again and improve again, try again and improve, and so on. But in education, it's not like this, and it may be Saku because of this unclear answer to this question, that who is responsible for this continuous development of these ideas. I think it's very unfortunate if we continue to behave like this, and if people who are excited about this work that we are talking about now here think that, you know, if my idea doesn't work, it means that it's a bad idea, or it will not work regardless of what. But that they would kind of develop also this mindset of developing and improving these innovations and ideas further rather than throwing them away. And I think that we have, along the way in education, we have ignored many good ideas and lost many good innovations simply because we haven't had this this kind of a stamina to continue improving these things. I think we really need to also clarify this question, that who is in charge. And again, I would look back at kind of a global responsibility of these networks that we have in doing this. I think each of us, when we are part of trying out something new and picking up innovations, new ideas, and trying to make them work, that we don't give up until it's absolutely clear among all of us that, you know, this is probably the idea that doesn't lead anywhere, and it's time to do something else. But let's take a kind of a shared collective responsibility for these improvements of these new ideas. And I'm sure that when we do that, then there will be also some other people who can support and help us, like authorities or the leadership within ourselves. But this is extremely important thing, just like you said, Saku.
And I think that whenever you are discussing with teachers globally about the word innovation, I think that some of them are actually quite irritated about the whole word. And I think that it might be partly because there's been the philosophy of almost like force feeding innovations, meaning pushing a new innovation doesn't work, replacing again and again. So there's a constant flow of innovations which are almost distracting teachers from teaching and so on. So I think that some of the innovations might even lead to a wrong place, right?
Yeah, can I add, Saku, that also experienced teachers, or actually you don't need to be a teacher too long, almost in any system around the world, when you learn this thing, that these new innovations, new ideas that come to school are really kind of supported or sustained before the new innovations, new ideas come. So teachers learn this kind of a waves of innovations coming to schools, and they rarely lead anywhere, any kind of a sustained and permanent change, because as soon as they have learned to understand and do something with these new ideas, there's a new wave of innovations coming into the school. So you're absolutely right, Saku, that, you know, if you find innovation a bad word or not not appropriate term. Just use something else. Talk about new ideas or solutions or something like this. Then the other one that we spoke last time, for those who were not with us last time, I think it's very important to understand that innovation in education doesn't necessarily mean that we are trying to figure out something completely new. It can be something that has been invented in the history, in the past, but not really used that much. And again, the history of education, educational ideas is full of those great ideas that were invented as innovations, but never really spread or adopted by anybody. And there are a lot of good ideas over there. So we should not kind of look badly to those people who go back to the history and dig these great ideas that have been developed and try to use them in this time or these times when we are really in need of new thinking.
Exactly, and maybe the time was not ripe for the ideas. But let's move towards the step nine, and I think that in order to be really able to develop and continuously develop these innovations and so on, resources are needed. And I think that this is an area which also is quite often overlooked, because really improving them is a time consuming and labor intensive. It might need financial resources and so on. But you've been, Pasi, talking quite a lot about in-kind resources as well, meaning is that if you want to really improve the innovations and make them work in your own context, hours are needed, passion is needed, you have to have time to make the mistakes and improve and so on. So what is your take on in-kind resources before we are mentioning briefly the financial resources, which are obvious?
Yeah. Obviously, the most immediate in-kind resource when it comes to teachers and schools work, of course, is time. That somehow we need to make time available for people to think about improvement and discuss these new ideas and innovations if they want to do. And this, and everybody needs to understand this, that the teachers around the world, and now we have a number of countries around the world joining us in this webinar, and the teachers are in a very different situation in terms of this in-kind resource. And secondly, I think that when we move forward from this situation, something else that nobody knows what it's going to be like, these in-kind resources will become even more important. I don't think that there are too many education systems or even subsystems of education anywhere that would have a luxury to think about this recovery from the pandemic or transition to the new normal in schooling that would be built on significantly increased financial resources for this. So that's why I think it's a very smart thing probably at this time to really underline this in-kind resources and really take this time thing more, like very seriously in the work of educators and certainly teachers who in the end are going to implement or not implement these new ideas. So how do we make more time and organize the work of the school so that the time would not be the thing that would block some of these good ideas, as it has been until now in many cases. That teachers say that they would love to do something new, but they can't do it because there's not really time to do that.
I agree, but at the same time, funding is also needed. And even if you are a non-profit innovation organization, so much goes back to the solid, sustainable funding model, because otherwise you might end up working in late evenings, weekends, and so on, and that might lead into a burnout and so forth. But then, obviously, in most of the countries, the funding is not a simple thing, and everyone are fighting for the same funding. So, Pasi, how do you see there's two options. One is that you are giving small amount of funding to everyone, and the other solution is that you are actually quite tough and you are selecting the ones that have the biggest potential to make a change. So would you be sort of like concentrating a lot of the funding to some innovations which seem to be impactful, or would you be spreading it to the whole of the community?
Well, the politically the easiest thing, of course, at the system level would be to give everyone something based on some criteria. So what is the size of the community or school or something like this. Much more difficult
to give everyone too little.
Yeah. Then you would probably, as somebody who has to sign into these decisions, would suffer the least. But there actually, if you look around the world, you can find not too many, but there are some interesting examples, like a whole system level examples of this type of innovation funding. And one of the best one, probably the best one I know, happened over the period of 10-11 years in the province of Alberta in Canada a few years ago. It was called the Alberta Initiative for School Improvement. That was giving schools and educators about 85 to 100 million Canadian dollars a year. So it was about almost $1 billion innovation experiment. And that money went to good ideas. So there was a kind of a set of criteria what will be funded, and it represented about almost 2% of the annual budget of the education budget. And I was part of the research group that did the review, the assessment, evaluation of that. And one of our conclusions was that because of this type of competitive but qualitative way of funding system level innovations, Alberta was able to climb to be one of the highest performing education systems in the world, together with Finland and some others. So there are some examples, but they are very, very rare. The much more common is that when the public funding is given to improving education, improving schools, the easiest thing by far is to cut it into smaller pieces and give everyone too little, as you said, Saku.
Exactly, and a short term as well, so that it's
quick fixes.
Exactly, and then the point number 10 is an obvious one, which we quite often seem to forget. Is kind of like the humbleness, meaning is that it's education ecosystems are extremely complex, and if making change happen in personal life or in a company is complex, in an ecosystem like education, it's really complicated and so on. So I think that we should have the mindset is that we are not looking for easy fixes, and we understand that there will be a lot of challenges ahead, and yet we have to stay positive. Pasi, brief comment on this one, and then we go to the questions and comments from the community.
Yeah, no, I think that this really says everything. But we also need to keep in mind that these education systems resistance to change is often a good thing. That it's not just a bad thing, as people often say, that education systems change so slowly. Sometimes it's good that they change slowly, because often the quick changes are not either inclusive or leading to good results. One of my mottos is that to rush education reform is to ruin it, and it very much applies also in these things that we do, that we have to kind of tolerate the slow pace of change, because in many times we are pushing things to happen too fast. It just ruins everything. So that's exactly as you said, Saku, that it's a complex and it's also a complicated thing to do. So we need to have this kind of a mindset again to wait that the good things happen.
Exactly, and I think that when we've been trying to analyze areas, cities, countries where there's been massive problems, quite often the process has been top down, it has been superficial, it's been too fast, and there has been extremely small amount of engagement, which means that you are force feeding innovations top down, and then as a result you get resistance, and just like you said, it's not a bad thing, it's totally understandable.
Yeah. Can I, Saku, say one thing before we go to the conversation here, because there may be some people now who are listening to this conversation, especially those who were with us last week, that okay, you guys, you are offering a kind of a 10 steps, kind of a linear list of 10 things that you are offering now as a solution. I think we all probably think that these 10 things is not a kind of a step-by-step linear thing, but if we are serious about this complexity and complicated nature of improving education, all these 10 things may happen even simultaneously, and that they are connected in a very complicated way, and understanding these 10 steps that we are talking about again is a very important. That we, at least I am not thinking that start with the step 1 and then move to step 2 and this is how you fix this thing. That these are some of those themes that we need to keep on talking about and thinking about and doing something about, and that they all are linked even to more steps than these or more issues than this, and that's what it makes it difficult. But how do you see this, Saku, yourself?
I couldn't agree more, and so on. And this is a simplification, but I think that it can be a good simplification and a useful simplification. But we are asking help from the community, and we have been asking help already between these 2 webinars. And now I'm giving it to Mariah and Pukraj. Mariah has been selecting a couple of comments from the answers in survey already, which we can comment briefly, and Pukraj is following the discussion, the questions in chat and so on. So Mariah, over to you.
Yes, so we have both survey and questions. So these are different. The comments, if you could go to the next screen, these were taken directly from the survey that we sent out last week, and a lot of great comments. We selected just a few that kind of highlighted a lot of main issues. So this one is, because of the emergency nature of the situation, everything was accelerated, and a linear list does not really describe what happened, which is something that Pasi already addressed. But if you'd like to expand on that point.
If I can make a comment, quite often people say in lists like this, they are saying is that this is a simplification and so on. Yeah, couldn't agree more, but I think that was the goal of this one, to kind of like create an oversimplified list, is that this is how we see it, but in real life, there's overlaps, there's modifications, it's never ABC and so on, it's complex, but still it helps to have this kind of simplified list to kind of like get the whole picture. Or Pasi, what do you think? You already commented this.
Yeah. No, I think I said already. But just a brief comment on this. That it's afterwards, after crisis, all these things that happened and we were not aware when they started to happen look kind of a fairly simple and easy. So we also have to understand that exactly as this statement here says, that things happened unplanned very quickly, and it was an emergency, and that's why people are doing and were doing things that they were doing with the best judgment. But again, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but if we are analyzing cities or countries or schools where there were massive problems, I think that it most likely it was partly because some of these 10 steps was lacking. For example, lack of communication, lack of clarity, lack of engagement, and lack of constant development and so on. So I think that all of these 10 are needed in order to take care of a quality education for all.
Absolutely, but not in a sequence as we are presenting them here. Yeah.
So before we move on to the next comment, Pukraj, have you any questions from the chat that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, actually, so I've been scanning the many questions that are on the Q&A box, and I've tried to combine a few. So Pasi and Saku, one large question that's coming out of the discussion in the chat as well as the Q&A box is, what is your understanding of quality education? So given the global education system is extremely diverse and there are a variety of inequalities, be it digital poverty, parent-educator disconnect, gender inequality, lack of professional development, can you suggest some parameters, some basic things that would be needed as we move forward and go towards transforming education?
Pasi, do you want to start?
Okay, yeah.
I'm more than happy to comment briefly. How we see this model is that this model is quite flexible, because you need to start with a vision, and you have to be kind of like starting from vision and then engaging the community, planning the resources and so on. And the vision can and will be different from ranging from Helsinki to Ghana to Uganda and so on. So I think that in each and every place you need to have the vision, you need to have the goal, you need to engage the community and so on. But I think that it is varying from continent to continent, from country to country, from school to school. But the basic principles should apply.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Saku, in order to have a strong, shared, and sustainable vision, we need to have a good understanding of what are the problems and issues of the time.
Definitely, but they are different in
Yeah, but you know, as we heard in the introduction to this part of the conversation, I think, you know, one of those challenges or problems, I can call it, that people see now much more clearly throughout the world than we did before, is this huge range of inequalities that we have in everywhere, including places
totally.
like Finland. And you know, somebody said that this pandemic, this crisis, has not necessarily created any new inequalities, but it has really poured gasoline on the old ones, meaning that now we can see those things. And you know, if we build the vision thinking on a small number of these problems that we really want to work out, the inequality, the range of inequalities that we have in all around the world in education should be one of those things. And because that should be driving this visionary thing, this kind of a goal setting for the future. And there are many others, but you know, this is one of those things. Then of course the other one is that, you know, if you look at the education systems or schools around the world, you see that some schools and some systems have been really fast in reacting to these things. That they kind of mobilized themselves almost immediately when these signs of crisis were there. Then there were those schools and whole systems that were kind of waiting for somebody to give us a call and say what we should do next. And this is the other one, that do we really, if we think about the vision for education, are we thinking about something that would be based on the same kind of old model of waiting compliance and waiting for somebody to give us advice what to do next? Or do we probably think about education as something that is more reactive and flexible and dynamic and kind of a self-directed into this? So that's why I'm saying that it's important to also identify these challenges or problems that this vision is actually built on.
I think that we fully agree on everything regarding this. At HundrED, we are the basic principles we are having are actually quite clear, which means that a high quality education should fundamentally help each and every child flourish in life, no matter what happens. And there should be the excellence and equity principle, meaning that we should be able to provide quality education for all. And as we all know, the challenges regarding this one are massive in many countries and so on. And that should be part of the vision and should be part of the resources and should be part of the selecting. We should be selecting innovations that are closing the gap, not increasing and widening the gap. And it is a massive challenge in many countries. But let's move on.
Excellent. We will do this last point and then we will invite our panelists to join us and ask their questions. Thank you so much for your patience. So this comment is, in general, the ministerial response has been vague, not well structured, and poor in terms of offering. The situation is very disorganized and characterized by inequalities in terms of access to resources and devices. So any comments about this?
And these comments came quite often, and in many of the comments, people say that the messaging or the communication was not consistent at all. Meaning is that there were different kind of mixed messages were coming, and even the mixed messages were changing week after week. So how do you see, because people are uncertain, how do you see, Pasi, the role of consistency and clarity of the communication towards the education community?
Of course, it's absolutely critically important, but I think that this statement really reflects the reality around the world, and the fact actually that education systems in most countries have been not driven by experts' advice and expertise. It's been driven by politics and often ideological thinking. And now when we fell into this horrible global health crisis, you know, the mantra among the politicians has been that we must rely on the knowledge from our health experts. But when did we hear last time, when we had an educational crisis, political leaders saying that we are relying on the knowledge, the best knowledge and evidence from our education experts? Never. And I think that this probably illustrates this thing, this kind of a panic that has been in many governments, and especially education ministries, when they all of a sudden they have to figure out where these education experts, where is this expertise that they can rely on. So, you know, I understand this type of statement as a lack of this type of culture in many countries, where the education policymakers would have been systematically relying on drawing their decision on education, the best experts and expertise in the field of education. So now we are learning this, and hopefully, you know, one thing that we can hope that comes out of this crisis is that also the education policymakers and decision makers would more, you know, think about their own education experts and global education experts when they're thinking about their next education reforms and policies. But this is a really good illustration of this panic that has been in many countries and governments when the ministers and policymakers don't really know what to do because they don't have those experts around, as they do often in the health or infrastructure or many other areas, but not in education.
Agree.
With that, I would like to move on. We have three wonderful ladies who have been waiting to ask their questions. So Wilma, if you could start, I will unmute you now.
I'm Wilma from Aruba, the Dutch Caribbean area, and I'm very pleased and honored to be in this very important seminar. My question is, one of my questions is that the COVID-19 has tapped into the creativity skill at all levels of communities, from problem solving and governance, schools and nations and homes, to healing tools, creativity as healing tools for mental health in homes and schools and teachers. And the area of developing creativity as a 21st century skill, theoretically on paper for many years, is arts education. What importance should arts education have in the curriculum and national education budgets right now, as that was where everybody has been tapping into to solve problems? Collectively also, as art education helps one all the soft skills and also on the social emotional skills, and so we can get into a collective learning together, including especially the parents and the teachers, and of course the children, the kids, the teenagers, and all learners. Thank you.
Thank you. Pasi, do you want to start now?
Yeah, well, personally, I want to thank you, Wilma, for bringing a very, very important part. And it's you know, arts is a broad thing, including music, visual arts, drama, many other things. I think what we together with this creativity and creative thinking in solving problems, I think what we will need now with our young children, when they are 1.5 billion children are beginning to return back to schools, and you know, they are not the children that they were a few months ago, you know, before this all started. There are many of them have a lot of anxiety and emotional stress and many other things for a range of reasons, and there's no other better way to help them than arts and music and drama and many other things. So I hope that we also will learn now within the next coming months the power of these subjects And not only for the 21st century skills, as you said, Wilma, that is very important, but also for the well-being and happiness of young people.
Well,
And so it's a very, very important thing. And my hope is really there that we would see firsthand how important and meaningful it is for. Thank you so much for this question.
And I want to thank Wilma as well, but let's move on so that we have time for 2 other questions as well, because
Yes.
I agree with everything that Pasi said.
Thank you, Saku. And the next panelist, Nia, I will unmute you, and if you could ask your question.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. As I agree with everybody in terms of thinking about leadership and leadership in complex systems, I think it's really important to think about that. But I also think it's an issue we need to think about is how we prepare our young people to better navigate complex systems. So how do we start?
Saku, your turn. I mean, this is one of my big passions, and I think that there is no easy answer. But I think that we should also be seeing the value in crises like this, because this is most likely what we will be getting in the future as well. Because we are living in an uncertain world, and once something like this happens, is that I think that we should not be kind of like trying to stick to the old ones, but we should understand is that, okay, this is a totally new kind of situation. Let's analyze, let's react, let's try things, and let's be kind of like excited also about the things that did not work. Quite often when we are discussing about education innovations, people are asking that how do we know that this works? Well, the problem in tomorrow's world is that not everything works. And even things that didn't work might be a useful learning experience and so on. So I would be praising uncertainty, and I would be kind of like taking everything we can out of this moment to teach the whole concept of uncertainty. Pasi, what do you think yourself?
Yeah, again, Nia, thank you very much for this question. For me, there's no better way to do that than truly give young people in school a leadership. That they should have opportunity to lead their own lives and learning in school much more than they do now. If they don't have that right in the school, how can they learn? They all would learn these things in the life. So let's give them a voice, and let's let the children lead more than they do now. You know, some of the best examples I've ever seen anywhere around the world about these practices in schools are here in Australia. So the good practices already are in place where the young people and students are leading their own schools and learning these important things, Nia, that you were talking about. So let's do that.
Thank you for
I fully agree, and great example from Finland as well was that teachers were letting students, the kids, to select the tools, the platforms they were using during the crisis.
Right.
And it was beautiful. They said is that you are the experts on the digital world. Why don't you select the tools we will be using? And it was beautiful. So fully agree.
Thank you again for that question, Nia. And now we will go to Mercy.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to allow me to be part of this forum. And my question will be based on access, because speaking from a Kenyan perspective, and also most of the developing countries, we're having a major issue on access even before we move into quality. And now through that same line, how would you advocate for the inclusion of project-based activities to enforce the social and emotional well-being of children who do not have access to education generally through the various online and televised platforms? So yeah, that's what I would want us to explore. How practically will you make activities or projects that will address the emotional well-being of these children? Thank you.
Well, Mercy, I think you are really you are pointing to a complicated and difficult and real problem really that, I don't know if I had an answer to this question, I really wouldn't be sitting here in this webinar, but doing something else. But I think that the technology that we have had, whether it's a TV or radio or digital platforms that we have used, or smartphones, whatever it is, has revealed some opportunities, but it's never gonna solve the challenge that you described, particularly the emotional and social well-being that is often accelerated by these devices. So this is, I have to admit that I don't have answer to this important question, what to do with that, other than probably repeat what I said when I was answering to Nia's question earlier, that more we engage young people and the communities in education, more we break the kind of a barriers of a school building or formal education, and try to do important things through young people to young people. And I know that in many African countries, this has been a really powerful way of educating young people about important things, not necessarily to the point that they would get a degree or qualification, but addressing some of these important things from young person to young person, and the innovations that could be used for that have been able to do something. But I cannot really say much more than this. I don't know, Saku, if you want to add something to this.
Actually, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if we could get to the final questions, has been waiting, and we are running, unfortunately, short of time.
Sure.
So Zineb, if you could go ahead and ask your question.
Can you unmute?
I'm so sorry, I'm trying. There you go.
Oh, could you hear me right now? Okay, good. So thank you, dear professors. My question is about the blended learning and online learning. So we are seeing that everywhere around the world right now, they are responding to this COVID-19 outbreak by going directly to the online learning. And we know that online learning, we cannot just implement it for all countries, because we don't have similar resources, as the Mercy from Kenya said. But could we say that the education, tomorrow's education will could look like a combination between the online learning and blended learning? So we start with the online learning, we start with the blended learning, and the 50% we leave it to the online learning, that we could be prepared for any challenges, because towards tomorrow's education, or tomorrow, the world tomorrow, it's gonna be very challenging. Yeah, thank you.
Ginep, thank you for the beautiful question. And I think that for me, this has been really valuable experience, learning experience for everyone working in education. And just like you said, is that it's not black and white. I think that the basic feedback at the moment is that some things online have been working actually surprisingly well. Meaning is that it's inspiring, it can be global, you can be doing many things, and so forth. So I think that there's a lot of positive things in here. At the same time, there's massive problems as well. So some things have been surprisingly difficult, inequity being one of those, the lack of tools being one of those, and so on. So I think that it shows that a lot of potential in online, but also is that I cannot see the world where face-to-face, where playing, where going to nature, where doing things offline is not needed, and so on. So I'd say that it's not black and white and so on. But also webinars like this, I think one of the beautiful things in this one has been the global cooperation between the education ecosystem. Pasi, what is your take?
I fully agree, as you used to say.
Well, a big thank you to all of our panelists and for your very thoughtful questions. Thank you for joining us today. If we could jump back on, we're running quite low on time, but we have a few more things that we would like to cover. So that includes next steps. Saku.
And I can take it from here. So the basic goal for this one was that this is not the end result. This is the starting point of this process. Our goal is that we are asking feedback from all of you in our survey. There's already a lot of extremely valuable insights, comments from the community. We will keep collecting those. And our goal is that we will be releasing a report on key insights from the global community in September. And after that one, we are thinking about some kind of tools, online tools, where we could be helping or educating all the leaders in all continents on key insights, on do's and don'ts, and create some sort of plan that would be useful. And if you can change the slides. Based on the feedback we've been getting is that some member of the community proposed that let's collect 100 teacher leader schools to apply lessons learned over the last few years. This is exactly what we are trying to do. So the goal would be is that we would be giving you insights from all parts of the world. And then the next one, and people are saying is that there's a lack of possibilities for school leaders to receive any training in innovation, pedagogy, and leadership, and so on. And when we've been looking for innovations globally, one of the key challenges we've been facing is that there's a lack of leadership innovations in education, which we are trying to look as well. Pasi, how do you see the quality of the leadership globally in education at the moment?
Given the short time that we have, I would just say that there's a lot of room for improvement, but there are also a lot of high quality and potential leadership, educational leadership associations and professional groups around the world, much more than they used to be, that can be helpful with this.
And our goal is that together with you, we will be creating some sort of tools that could be useful in all continents, taking care of the different situations each and every country and community is facing. But back to you, Mariah.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your questions. I've seen some thanks for us, but really I want to stress that while this is a webinar and there's some talking heads up there, that this has been a conversation, and we're so happy that you could join us and be a part of it. And we would love to continue this conversation. So please, if you have 15 minutes, please take the time to answer our survey, because as we've said multiple times, this is just the first step. Nobody was prepared for this crisis, and we hope that we can take what we've learned from it and bring it forward for not just the next crisis, but for the future of education. So with that, Pukaras has already dropped the link to the survey in the chat. Also, please do, if you enjoyed the webinar and you want to hear more, join the HundrED community, become an ambassador, or just like us on Facebook. And with that, I would like to say a really big thank you. Anything else that you would like to say, Saku, Pasi?
I can say that as HundrED is a non-profit organization, I'm saying that all the tools we are releasing will be free of charge and can be used in any parts of the world. And with these words, I also want to thank Pasi not only for these 2 webinars, but also the various discussions we've been having about this topic, and most likely the discussions we will be having in the future as well. So thank you so much for you, Pasi, and everyone else who participated today.
No worries, mate.
Thank you, Pasi. Thank you, Saku. Thank you, Nia, Mercy, Zainab, and Wilma. And thank you everyone who has attended. With that, don't worry, we will send you the recording and the slides, and we hope to see you in many webinars to come. So thank you so much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.